Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's program. We're so grateful to gather here to learn more about invasive plant species. My name is Sarah, and I'm one of Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake's Program and Outreach Coordinators, as you can see here. We're going to get started, but we're going to take a brief look at a quick tech orientation on the next slide, just to ensure a pleasant experience for tonight's program. First, we ask that you keep yourself muted during this presentation. Also, if you have to get up and move around, we please ask that you turn off your camera. This session is being recorded. So again, if you do not wish to be shown during this webinar, please turn off your camera now. And last, please use the chat function as a way to ask for help should you need assistance. One of our IPC staff here tonight will do their best to assist you. And next, you can see a lovely staff photo from our first summit. We're looking forward to the next. I'm here at the first row. All my contact information is there. If you happen to find yourself in the DMV area and looking to connect, please reach out. Next, we're going to take a quick look at tonight's program lineup. We're going to begin, as always, with a land acknowledgement and an opening reflection, followed by some information about our organization for any new folks in the room. And then we'll get to meet our panelists for in-depth discussion about tonight's topic, and followed by Q&A. And as always, again, we'll close with a prayer. So now I'd like to take a moment, and if you want to join me while muted, we would like to take an acknowledgement of this land and these waters that were stewarded by many who came before. So please join us in recognition. For today, we hold space and reflection on and gratitude for the land upon which we live and the local waters that support and nourish us all. We recognize that this land and these waters were stewarded by many who came before, and we reflect together as people of faith in response to the calling of our hearts, to come alongside the original stewards of this land and these waters that sustain us all. We seek to change the narrative of this story, our story, towards one of harmony with the gifts of creation and all living beings. And so we will provide a link in the chat right here, and we encourage you to find more by visiting this native-land.ca. It's going to just take you to a map that shares a snapshot of history in the region and those original stewards from up to 1,000 years ago. It's really cool. Next, we're going to share a prayer as the excitement of spring is upon us. Dear Lord, you have what it takes to make this spring my best spring ever. You can make this spring amazing, astounding, and astronomically awesome. You can bring bountiful blessings to me. You can help me create a continually contagious, caring, and compassionate attitude in my heart. You can design and deploy desirable, dynamic dreams about my destiny that will capture my imagination and ignite my determination. You can open seemingly endless streams of encouragement and edification to me, and you can flow your living water into my heart and inspire me to be freshly, faithfully focused on you. So my prayer request to you, Lord, is don't hold back. Let all the wisdom, insights, healing, mercies, provisions, relationships, blessings, and dynamic energy that you have ready to give start flowing without hindrance. And I will seek to put myself in a position to cooperate with you, yield to you, and receive from you. With excitement and love, I pray. And next, we're going to shift gears quickly. We just always want to take a moment to show gratitude for all of our funders and supporters for this work, which just wouldn't be possible. And as you can see on the next slide, we just want to show folks our role and how we help connect congregations to environmental partners, outside organizations, local governments, and other organizations that are interested in this work. Next, if you want to find out more who's already partnering with us, we have more information about our One Water partnership. We're going to be sending some more information on how you can join if you haven't signed up to be a partner congregation already. Next, couldn't forget mentioning, we have a Green Leaders Faithful training starting next week. Thank you for all that have registered. We're really looking forward to it. And last but not least, just take a look at our resource page. We always have fun and exciting things. We're going to be launching a couple new action kits this year, and we'll be letting our folks know when those are published. And you can check that out on our website. Thank you, Rebecca. Let's get started and delve right into tonight's discussion, all about invasive plant species. So our first speaker of the evening is Farida Abbasi. She's a nurse practitioner and registered nurse and has been living with her family in Northern Virginia for a couple decades. Her hobbies are traveling, hiking, visiting national parks, and learning all there is about natural life. She's an avid book reader, watching documentaries on how the universe works, and she has special interest in environmental stewardship, and that's kind of led her to be active in the Invasive Management Area Program in Fairfax County. So we're very excited to hear what she's talking about in regards to invasive plant species management and how Virginia is kind of tackling this issue. She's a certified tree rescuer, which is awesome, working with Plant Nova natives, campaign and collaborating with volunteers to reverse the decline of native plants and wildlife in Northern Virginia. So please, everyone, welcome Farida. And I'll just ask you to unmute and we'll put a spotlight. And we can move to the next slide. Perfect. Thank you so much, Rebecca. Farida, are you unmuted? I'm so sorry. I'm trying to find you and I want to make sure we're spotlighting you.
Yes, I'm on.
Perfect.
Thank you so much. Good evening. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk tonight about general principles for managing non-native invasive plants. I'm sorry about my voice. It's kind of hoarse this evening, and because of I've been under weather for a few days, so I'm talking fast. I hope you understand, what I say. Please let me know if you have any questions. Of course, at the end, we will have that section. So, in general principles for managing non-native invasive plants, as we know, invasions of non-native plants into forests and landscapes of southern United States continue to spread and include new species, increasingly eroding forest productivity, hindering forest use and management activities, degrading diversity and wildlife habitat. The extent and spread of non-native plant species has taken many people by surprise in many areas of the country, and it is still not comprehended by most people. But the important thing is that we need to act fast to stop the rapid encroachment of non-native invasive plants, eradicate infestations, and restore native communities. The definition of invasive plant is a species that is non-native or alien to the ecosystem under consideration, and whose introduction causes or is likely to cause economic or environmental harm or harm to human health. And in Virginia, like some other states that have these invasive plants, we have our own invasive plants that have kind of evaded our parklands, trails, all of our green spaces. And those invasive plants include Japanese stilt grass, multiflora rose, kudzu, garlic mustard, bittersweet, honeysuckle. So the damages and impact of invasive species could be limiting or stop productive land management and regeneration of forests and grasslands, displace and permanently decrease biodiversity and wildlife habitat, alter vital ecological processes such as soil formation, watershed function, and pollination of native plants, limit land access for recreation, activities such as hiking, fishing, hunting, and bird watching, produce overabundant pollen that causes widespread allergenic reactions in humans, and present extreme fire hazards to forests, preserves, and homes. And also, they can cause psychological anxiety in people through a sense of the inability to control our surroundings. The general principles for managing non-invasive plants include adaptation or adaptive resource management that refers to a community shared process of self-conscious learning by doing. The process involves goal setting, gaining experience and research findings, and monitoring actions and outcomes with rapid incorporation of new knowledge into refined goals and actions. Collaboration with other workers and landowners in identification of invasive plants. But for the most and greatest effectiveness, we must develop and use some communication networks to link local, county, state, and regional programs. Restoration of infested land to healthy and productive ecosystems must be our guiding objective. We only can be successful with eradication, control, and containment of invasive plants through the establishment of desirable and useful plants that protect soil, produce needed resources and habitats, and safeguard our lands from resurgence of invasive plants. We must identify, establish, and culture resistant and resilient plant communities on rehabilitated and restored lands. Then we must monitor these communities for the first possible signs of returning invasive plants. Early detection rests with public education, as well as organized search and surveillance efforts, and strong reporting networks. Movement of contaminated equipment and materials must be effectively prevented to stop new infestations from being established, to stop spreading and worsening of the growth and also developing growth of these invasive plants. Treatment must be timely and persistent. For all work near or inside infested areas, extra care must be taken to ensure sanitation of equipments and personnel to prevent spread. Now, the important principles to follow for every individual is that it can be practical for every person is never plant recognized invasive plants. Seek information on whether or not a plant is invasive before you purchase it. Detect invasive plants early through active surveillance of your lands. Map and mark locations of invasive plants you find. Apply and document eradication treatments and monitor their effectiveness. Retreating as needed. If treatments do not work, research ways to improve current treatments or find more effective alternatives. Locate sources of non-contaminated materials for soil stabilization and road construction. If you detect several invasive plants, prioritize your treatment by targeting the worst of the plants first. The worst plant may not be the plant that has infested your land the most or has the highest level of infestation. In many cases, the worst plant may be the plant that occupies the least territory but has the greatest potential for spreading. You should manage your fight against several detected species by balancing eradication of first entries of high priority, invasive plants with persistent treatment of extensive infestations. To prevent the spread of invasive species by contaminated equipment and personnel, postpone all management activities until you have suppressed or eradicated invasive plants from the site, or be prepared for consequences of wider occupation. And always, always inspect and clean equipment before moving to another site. Now, at the end, I wanted to mention the program that I've been involved during the last few years with the invasive IMA, or Invasive Management Area Program, in Fairfax County, Virginia. Which this program is basically a community-based project that has been designed to reduce invasive plants on our parklands. This program gives volunteers an opportunity to connect with like-minded people while taking care of natural resources. Through IMA, we protect the plants and wildlife of Fairfax County forests while spending time outdoors, meeting new people, and restoring natural habitats. And IMA is not just pulling the weeds, but it's a habitat restoration and long-term commitment to parks. And as we all know, invasive plant species are difficult to treat and to remove. But we have volunteers in this program who have been working hard in order to remove these invasive plants and to plant and work on native plants in order to return the nature to the natural habitat. Native planting usually takes place in the spring and fall. And some statistics about this program that began in 2006 with 220 sites, and since then, more than 150 acres have come under IMA management, and there are 65 active IMA sites and volunteer site leaders. And at the end, I just wanted to show one of the pictures that in one of our parks, that is Fred Crabtree Park, that I've been working basically under the supervision of my mentor, that she might be in this meeting tonight, Heidi Allen. Heidi Allen and Margaret Fisher in Northern Virginia are recipients of the Friends of Trees Award for their commitment and ingenuity in creating the Tree Rescuer volunteer opportunity and group. This initiative allows residents to save trees on private and public lands by cutting non-native invasive vines and freeing trees and supporting healthy wildlife habitats. And I was honored to work under the direction and training of Heidi Allen in this program, and we have been able to rescue trees and remove the invasive plants in different areas and plant some native trees in this area. And this is one of the time during the winter time that we were active in Fred Crabtree Park. Thank you so much for your attention and your time.
Thank you so much, Farida. I just want to make mention, I was surprised to learn about the link with invasives and fire risks and some of, like the mention of psychological effects like anxiety and a couple other, I think, not readily thought of negative impacts. And it's just worth mentioning, as many folks may realize here, that some of our local favorite places to shop, like Home Depot and Walmart, will not have those natives at the forefront of options. So thank you, Farida, for really mentioning about researching, and it's really good to clean your tools. It's just so easy to have them transfer. I really appreciate how in-depth your presentation was. So thank you so much again, Ferda. Next, thank you so much, Rebecca, for showing everyone our next keynote speaker of the evening. I want to welcome Barbara Tuset, who serves as the co-director of the Audubon at Home program, where she works with residents, businesses, and institutions to restore wildlife habitats in Northern Virginia. She's a former high school biology teacher and retired software professional. Really amazing resume. Barbara's found new inspiration for conservation through Douglas Tallamy's Bringing Nature Home. Many of us are familiar with Doug Tallamy's teachings. She's a certified Fairfax Master Naturalist and is passionate about raising awareness of invasive plant species and their impact on biodiversity. So everyone, please welcome Barbara.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very, very much for having me. And I didn't know that Farida was going to go ahead of me. She's been in the real trenches here, so I'm hoping that I can embellish around the edges for her. Thank you so much again for having me. Are you able to see my screen all right? I'm going to set it into slideshow mode right now.
It looks great.
Okay, good. So, as you said, I am the co-director of the Audubon Society of Northern Virginia, which actually had a name change in August of last year. So, and you may have seen that across the board if you have relations with an Audubon Society chapter anywhere, that several of them changed their names to something else. So we are now a Northern Virginia Bird Alliance. One of our alliances is with Plant Nova Natives that was mentioned before, and with the Urban Forestry Division in Fairfax County, which is where we are based, although we do our work around several counties, 5 or 6 counties. We reach as far out as Fauquier and Rappahannock in Northern Virginia or Virginia, and also Fairfax, Arlington, Loudoun, and Prince William. And our program began in 2010. We actually got a grant to begin doing some work to help landowners, homeowners mostly, create habitat. And we started that work based on a study that was done certainly nationally, but we did our own local surveys as well. And it resonated with us that they determined that 2.9 billion birds had left us, the overall population of them, since 1970. And we were looking for a reason for that. And locally, we were looking for a reason for that. Obviously, a lot of land development, a lot of urbanization was happening and disturbing native habitat. So we looked for something to do with that, and we found a grant program that helped us put together this wildlife sanctuary program that I'll be talking to you about tonight. It used to be that our area, although we certainly did have some prairie lands, looked a lot like this. And you can imagine losing all of this and ending up with landscapes that look something more like this in our more rural and outer suburban areas, I would say, looking very cookie cutter. The trees are gone. It is fragmented out the out the wazoo, and everything is a commercial landscape designer's idea of what the outdoors needs to look like. And here's another example of what that could be. You can certainly look at this, and if you have any idea of what a native plant or a species of wildlife would look like, you would expect to see very little in a landscape like this. being part of a citizen of the Chesapeake Bay area watershed, it's depressing to look at the background and know all of that lawn out there that gets mowed twice a week or once a week and is watered and gives no ecological benefit whatsoever. We'll talk a little bit about things that are not necessarily invasive plants, but they are non-native and what impact they have as well. So this is our program, Wildlife Sanctuary Program, and the goal behind it is to change the gardening and landscaping practices that people have, to shift the idea that you garden for what looks nice, what you've seen elsewhere, a lovely dahlia that you'd like to have in your yard, and you look to create habitat in your yard instead. Douglas Tallamy was mentioned in the intro before, and his idea is really to use every space to create wildlife habitat to make up for what it is that we have lost. And it's very, very doable. And this is what we work on. So one of the things that we use in order to work with our clients and make very clear to them what it is that we are looking for from them. And when I say clients, these are people who come to our wildlife sanctuary program who are looking for advice on their own property. So it could be an 1/8 or a 1/16 of an acre, or it could be a container garden on a balcony, or it could be a 20 or 80 acre plot of land. So they're looking to understand what is going on with their property, what they can do to make it more habitable for wildlife. And certainly one of the issues that always comes up is there are invasive exotic plants there that we need to deal with. So we start out with the plant, the intention of planting native plants. And I want to go through that a little bit because it helps you understand what the ecology is set up to be that's being disturbed by these invasive plants. So if you'll forgive me, I'm going to talk a little bit about our program and what we do. So there was a study a few years ago by Desiree Narango, who is a protege or an associate now of Doug Tallamy. And she did a study on chickadees and what it is that they actually need in order to be successful at breeding. So first of all, insects are extremely important to young birds. And we are the Audubon Society, or at least generated from that. So our avenue into this is birds, but we are by no means just limited to caring about them, for sure. So these non-native plants don't support native insects mostly. There are a few here and there. But when you don't have insects, as in larvae from Lepidoptera species, butterflies and moths, you are severely handicapping native birds. So they're less likely to actually nest in an area that is has non-native plants. And here I am saying non-native, and to include those that may not be aggressive invasive plants at this moment. We kind of know that that's a sliding scale, though, so stay tuned. If they do happen to nest there, then they're very likely to be less successful, and they may have smaller clutches. They may only mate once during the season, and you may, in fact, if you do nest watch, for instance, you may find failed nests with young baby birds that they could not feed. Non-native yards do not support chickadees. So you would say, wow, that's really something, because I thought chickadees were one of the most pervasive species. And maybe when a lot of us were growing up, that was the case. And now it's finding its way to be more so difficult for them. So what they found out in this study, Desiree Narango's study, was that it takes it takes chickadees between 6,000 and 9,000 caterpillars during the time that they're raising their birds are ready to fledge, to raise those babies. And that's a lot of caterpillars. So you can understand why, when they nest, they're going to choose places where they know they've got sources for those insects. That would mean mostly native trees, thankfully, many places that still have tree cover. But people who have put in perennials, people who have put in shrubs are certainly helping here as well. So there's a lot of demand for those plants, those native plants. And one of the things that we see is, and I think one of the most interesting classes that I ever took was a class on pollinators to understand the way that insects specialize with the plants that they will use as nectar sources or will lay their eggs on so that their caterpillars are raised and can metamorphose into moths or butterflies. So very important, that coevolution aspect. And what we find is that with different species of native plants, you have many, many more hosted insects on some of them than others. For instance, a redbud that doesn't show up on this, which is a native plant, seems to have a much more specialized group of insects, and they will only host about 25 native insect species for caterpillar food. But you will find on an oak tree, especially a white oak tree, that 537 different Lepidoptera species, moths and butterflies, can be hosted by an oak tree. So if you want to make the most difference in adding to the insect population and supporting wildlife throughout the food web, plant an oak tree. But the rest of them are not shabby here. These are pretty good trees. If you looked at a ginkgo, you might find 2. If you look at a crepe myrtle, you actually won't find any, I believe, that are hosted that way. They're certainly food sources, but not hosting for insects. And what we're looking for a successful wildlife habitat are insects for young birds and other animals. So the next thing on our best practices list for our clients is to remove their invasive exotic plants. So we're not saying these need to be done in any particular order, but generally, when we make a site visit for someone, we're finding the exotic plants, the invasive plants that are on their property, and writing up a list of them and saying, here's where you can go to find resources to remove those plants. And here's what you can do once you have created space to put in native plants. We also talk about very successful plants that can crowd out invasive plants. You wouldn't believe it maybe, but there are some that will take on Japanese stilt grass, such as Pachyra aurea, for instance, a very aggressive, if you will, native plant that does a good job of that kind of work. And the rest of these are certainly important, but today we are focusing on those invasive plants. And I will try not to dwell on things that Farida made a good point about earlier. So invasive plants aggressively replace native plants in the food web. They don't feed insects. And the cost of the United States to the United States in 2005 was $120 billion. So I don't know, that was a figure from 2005, and it was actually the latest one that I could find, believe it or not. And I would bet that Fairfax County can tell us what it is that they have been spending on that, because they've done extensive work in the last few years to really get to the heart of what's going on with their invasive problem. And we went through a definition also of what a native or indigenous species is, and what a non-native one, an alien or exotic species. This is a slightly different distinction. So we're talking about invasive plants being ones that aggressively take up space and do harm. We're talking about this group of non-native, alien, or exotic species as ones that are a little bit like furniture in the drawing room that you're not allowed to sit on. They're not useful, but they look good. So we, as people who are looking to build habitat, are not trying to get people to get rid of their mother's forsythia. But if it turns out to be an invasive plant, like for instance, Pachysandra, which I took to my house from my mother's house. I loved it. And there it was. And it's on the invasive list. And it's just one of those things that you need to manage until you get rid of it, if you're serious about making as much space for native plants as you possibly can. So again, the invasive plants, they actually cause harm, and they will reduce the population of native plants. They can hurt our wildlife, and they can definitely do a lot of work to the structure of our soils and so forth. There are roughly 1,600 invasive plant species in our natural areas in the United States. And you may notice that when you look at an invasive plant in our area in the mid-Atlantic, and then you look at what's out in California that they may be talking about as invasive, they may be different. So different species are invasive in different areas of the country, which is what that sliding scale I talked about is all about. And right here in this mid-Atlantic area, we have a little over 600 invasive plant species that have been listed. And it's very, very important to note, as Farida did, that many of them are sold by our local nurseries, our big box stores that do not care about what species they're introducing, as long as they have a supply of clients who are asking for them. So here's a very inspiring picture to people who are really want to get their teeth going on some invasive plants. We've got some privet, we've got some kudzu. It looks like maybe some oriental bittersweet in the back, just a lovely hodgepodge of all the bad actors. And this one, I'm not sure how badly it's hit here yet. I have seen some in Fairfax County. This is a fig buttercup, or lesser celandine. It's a lovely ground cover, and boy, does it cover fast. And I can understand why somebody would really love it. And if it shows up in your garden, if you're used to having volunteers, you might say, oh, that's a nice one. Let me just see what happens with that, which is one of the reasons why it is so important to be able to identify your invasive plants, or identify all of your volunteers. So having iNaturalist or Plant Snap on your phone is a really important skill to build. And here are some of the others that I'm sure you recognize in Fairfax. My gosh, this is so big. The autumn olive, our regional parks are filled with them. Garlic mustard, a really wonderful plant for a little botanizing. It's an interesting one because it's a good example of one of those allelopathic plants. And what that means is that it secretes chemicals into the ground that inhibit the growth of other plants. So they make themselves very happy right where they are and disturb other species. You can see right around this, there's no plant right here other than these plants. It's not like, oh, there were some violets and the seeds just popped up and these plants came. This is also a really interesting plant because it looks different in the 2 years that it lives. I'm sorry, I keep touching that and moving ahead, which I don't mean to do. We have our favorite Japanese stiltgrass down here in the bottom left. And then, of course, the honeysuckle that we talked about that smells so sweet and does such horrible work on our nature. And this is so an example of rescuing a tree. This is actually the husband of a friend of mine, my co-director for the Wildlife Sanctuary Program. This was a neighbor's tree. It was a healthy oak tree, but it was surrounded by, and that looks like, gosh, that's kind of some kind of columnar evergreen or something, right? With a broad leaf on it. Well, no, that is an oriental bittersweet on that tree. And it came down after a bunch of rain because of the weight on that tree. So the damage that the kind of tree encapsulation by these invasive plants is very, very damaging to the tree canopy, took down other trees with it. It could have taken a house. And if not properly taken care of, these things do damage. So it's really wonderful, the tree rescuer program that's been active with Plant Nova trees and with the IMA program has really been beneficial to the area. So to talk a little bit about those introduced invasive trees, if you just look at this landscape here at this colonial Virginia house, what you see here are invasives from every corner of the world, pretty much. And you think, oh, well, that's, my mother had those. I know what that is. That's probably a native tree or a native bush. Well, burning bush is one of the worst actors down here in the forefront. This it doesn't look like an invasive. We love them as Christmas trees, but it comes from the Rockies. We certainly have things from the Pacific Northwest, and that probably is not an invasive tree exactly, but it's also not a native, and it's not really helping anybody other than providing structure for birds probably to either perch or nest or hide from the snow. But you see our wonderful Callery pear there, which is quite a quite a species. So remember our chickadees, right? So here they are looking for caterpillars for their young, and they look at that landscape that we just saw, and there's no hope for them. So what is the ecological impact of these invasives? Is it really just that they take up space? They do more than that. And I alluded a little bit to the allelopathy, I think that's how you pronounce that word, of their behavior with their environment. And they do certainly climb and shade out and twist and strangle. I had someone try to tell me that Virginia creeper was an invasive plant, and we had that discussion about the difference between invasive and an aggressive native. And Virginia creeper luckily does not do any of that strangling. It also loses its leaves in the wintertime, unlike Oriental bittersweet or English ivy, which hold on to ice and snow, bring down trees, foster mosquitoes, etc. The monoculture behavior is also a very important point. The less diversity that we provide to our wildlife, the less wildlife we will have, and the less healthy we will be in the long run. So the action that the invasive plants have on the soil chemistry is also extremely important. It does a real number on the soil fungi, and it can have a lot to do with what kind of soil hydrology, how much water the soil can actually hold, which is a huge issue for the Chesapeake Bay area for sure. So here are some. These are cultivated ones, right? These are the ones that you would see in the garden center, and you can see them in little pots, and many of you probably have these in your yards, and I apologize, and I know you love them, and eventually I hope you'll come to the side of the driveway that says, yeah, maybe I could plant something a little more beneficial for our wildlife. Those Callery pears yet again, and the one on the bottom right are barberry. And gosh, I had a hedge of those when I was growing up, a mile long it seemed, and the prickers that you would get in your hands from working on them, you would think that would have been enough to not have them. You may know that there's a relationship between ticks and barberry. And I don't know the details about it, but there have been articles, scientific papers written on that. And I think that's an important thing to pay attention to too. So the well-meaning control, erosion control and things like that maybe the Department of Transportation has done in the past, has been responsible for introducing things like the autumn olive, for instance. We have in the horticultural trade, just because they were beautiful, we certainly cultivated a lot of damaging plants that people now know are invasive and are having a hard time giving up. And we have things that were introduced by mistake, that were let out of somebody's lab at some point. That's a big happening in aquatic invasive plants. And if you look to the right there, you see that the really wonderful heavenly bamboo that is supposed to now be sterile, and I believe has proven not to be. They do have them without berries, but come on, we can find a better thing to plant than Nandina, I think. So how do they spread? And I have to say that birds are probably one of the worst vectors in this process. They carry those berries that they eat everywhere. And certainly if someone says, my butterfly bush is not invasive, but there's anything that a butterfly bush can be shoved into a bird's mouth, it's going to carry that seed someplace. And butterfly bush is, in fact, in some places specified as an invasive plant. In North Carolina, it is. I'm not sure if it's on the Virginia list or not. And I know a lot of people would look at that and see the butterfly, and that means that there's nectar coming from that plant. But again, it's not supporting insect life. So it's giving high sugar content. That's great for energy, but it's really not doing a lot for the future of the species. And, you know, one of the big things here is that it's on a builder's plant list. These plants that you see, that you saw in that cookie cutter environment, are ones that are just promoted, and mostly because people don't check those things. They don't look at them again. It was made up 30 years ago, and it's good enough for now. So if it's at your nursery, you need to educate people about it. There's another view of our lovely calorie pear, all in a line. Probably the birds had something to do with that. Okay. And then just a really interesting combination of a invasive tree, which has actually been with us for about 300 years. It came from England, and maybe wasn't spread around terribly widely, but eventually it got well adapted, and it is now moving very fast. And it comes along with the added benefit of being one of the host plants for the spotted lanternfly, which is a damaging insect to our food crops, mostly vines for grapes and so forth, fruit trees. And if the ailanthus tree is there, the spotted lanternfly will find it and will lay its eggs on it, and it just compounds the issue. So just a little something about resources, and there was a lovely list at the end of Verida's presentation too. This Plant Invaders guide here is a wonderful, wonderful piece of information. You can download it. It is printed in a booklet, but it's a little difficult. It's out of print at this moment. The last edition, I think, no, I think we just made it an order, so you may be able to get one if you get it as a group. But it's a really wonderful thing with a lovely context setting introduction that gives you a real understanding of why invasive plants are something to stand up and pay attention to. And I'm just listing a lot of sources from the states that you all live in, who've done really wonderful jobs, either with their extension offices or research with universities and so forth. And there are a few in other states around the region, PRISMs, which are partnerships for invasive management. And there's one in Virginia in the Blue Ridge that has been involved with doing some advocacy to try and get some regulations around selling of invasive plants. So just a few ideas about how to combat invasives. I think really the first thing to do is to know how to identify them. Know the ones that are in your yard, in your neighborhood, on your drive to work. on your campuses, and just know that they are. And then start out by controlling the ones that you have some agency over, and convincing other people, engaging them in conversation, telling them about what you learned in this presentation or from that wonderful guide that I just mentioned. There are many videos online that you can share about it. And look for, with your groups, look for grant opportunities. Build partnerships with people who can be recipients of grants, or that can be generators of grants. And those can be really wonderful things. Volunteering businesses and faith communities are always looking to find a way to build community with people, and this really couldn't be a better opportunity for it. Planting natives, spreading the word about community members and to leaders in the media. There's a gentleman who writes an opinion column for the Washington Post who recently took a Master Naturalist class, and it writes often about either native plants or invasive plants. And so there are people out there that we know in the media. Advocate for regulations of the sale of invasive plants. There's no reason that somebody should be selling an English ivy at this point in our lives. And stress the cost of what it takes to manage and control from an agricultural standpoint, from a watershed standpoint, from a personal health standpoint. And one last thing here, really, to look to find grant money. So I'm going to say something about a grant that our organization, our chapter of the Native Bird Alliance did, along with and in partnership with the Plant Nova Natives, was to come up with a grant from the Fairfax Urban Tree Forestry Group. And excuse me, we did 10 grants of $3,000 to faith communities and HOAs for the removal of invasive species. We did on-site meetings with them to understand their issues and guide them to submitting an application. Again, we awarded 10 of them, and they used that money. We reimbursed them as the county reimburses us for the work. And they've been highly successful. We have 8 out of 10 of them having reported so far, and the other 2 are on schedule to do by the end of May. So just a last minute, I realize we're getting late, I'm sorry. If you look at this picture, imagine that you are the president of a garden club and you've got people coming to your house to see your lovely garden. Is there anything wrong with that picture? There are holes in those leaves, and that's a good thing. That's a thing to celebrate. That's Joe Pyeweed and Eastern swallowtail, tiger swallowtail butterflies. Enjoy. And I'll just scoop through these. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Barbara. I really appreciate you stressing the interconnectedness of the web of life and how all of these things are tied together. And you made a really good point about how detrimental the non-natives are to our local biodiversity. And we will pick up the conversation about these big stores that are selling the non-natives, because that's been brought up. I appreciate Sharon's question. We're going to get to Q&A in just a moment. If Rebecca, you wouldn't mind sharing screen. Yeah, thank you, because it's really hard to believe that this hour has nearly flown by. I apologize, Diane. We've saved you for last, but certainly not least. I do want to welcome a very strong supporter and longtime friend to IPC. She is an Anne Arundel County Watershed Steward, Class 13, and coordinator of the Green Team at her congregation, Christ Our Anchor Presbyterian Church in Annapolis. So I want to give the floor to Diane. Let me highlight you. She's been doing a really great initiative that's focused around invasive removal, and we wanted to just have folks hear about this really great initiative. Diane, please feel free to unmute yourself, and I'll spotlight you right now.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. Thank you to the previous speakers. I took a lot of good notes. I'm not going to talk very long, but I just want to share with you what we have been doing in our project to remove invasive vines from our 3-acre wooded property at Christ Our Anchor Presbyterian Church in Annapolis. And it's going to dovetail with what you've heard from the previous speakers, but give you a specific example of a church in action in this way, and hopefully to inspire you to start something similar at your church or your organization. So some background, we launched a green team at our small but active church on the Broadneck Peninsula in April 2021, right in the middle of COVID. So when we signed our partner pledge with Interfaith Partners of the Chesapeake, we did it outside when people we had a drive-by signing because if you remember how we were at that time, not meeting in person. And I am a member of an organization that I hold very dear in Anne Arundel County called the Watershed Stewards Academy. I'm a member of Class 13. So that's a year-long program here in Anne Arundel County to train people to be grassroots advocates for the environment and a cleaner Chesapeake Bay in their communities. And launching the Green Team at Christ Our Anchor was my capstone project after that year-long training. So our church, in our environmental work, we really value our partnership with IPC, with Watershed Stewards Academy, and we've gotten some wonderful funding support from a grant organization focused here in the county called Unity Gardens. So that's the background. And then specifically about our invasives removal program. Well, there were a couple of church members at Christ Our Anchor who could look out like all of us do and see our trees covered mostly in English ivy. And they got fired up to want to do something about it. So we quickly harnessed their energy and enthusiasm and pulled them into our green team. They are 3 generations of one family that go to our church, and we call them Team Lang. And they had already named themselves when we adopted them. It wasn't something we came up with, but we call our invasive removal program Wine and Divine. So that's fun. And the Langs always make us divine before we get to the wine. So we have to do the work first, but it's a unique fellowship opportunity at our church. So the way we got going, there we are. That's the wine portion. We trained in identifying, this is dovetailing with the previous speakers, we wanted to make sure that our volunteers knew what to pull out of our woods and what to leave behind. So we trained with a local expert here in Annapolis, a man by the name of Bud Reeves, with an organization called Anne Arundel Weed Resistance. So we did that in October 2021, so we could identify the good versus bad plants in our woods, techniques for removal, tools for the job. We really, our woods are filled with primarily English ivy, Oriental bittersweet, which we learned at that training you can identify by its orange roots. We have garlic mustard, which we're actually going to pull this spring when they're tender. So sometime this month, we're keeping an eye on them, or beginning of April, and we're going to cook them up actually for our Green Sunday service in April, and give them a try. Just like we, eating snake heads and blue catfish, we're going to try to eat our invasive garlic mustard. We generally meet about once a month at our church to do our wine and divine in October to December, and then March to May. We don't go out there in the in the bitterest cold, January and February, unless it's a temperate day. And we stay away from working in the summer when there are ticks and snakes, etc. And generally, I put on my green team T-shirt, giving a little visibility to our partnership with Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake when we're doing our work. So I would estimate that we have met about 15 times in the 3 years that we have been had launched Wine and Divine, and we've saved somewhere around 350 trees on our 3-acre property. I'd say we're maybe about 3/4 of the way done. We always bag up the vines that we pull out and discard them with the trash, to dovetail with some of the previous speakers who were talking about you don't want to contaminate, you don't want to allow that stuff to get away from you and reseed. So we discard it in the trash. And another thing that we have done is we put an orange ribbon around the trees that we save, so that this process of saving trees is visible to our congregation. We have people who are working with us sign a waiver. I'm showing it here a little bit, a waiver for an event and media release, so that allows us to our church to be held harmless. We are using tools that are sharp. It gives us a place then that we could list all of our participants, parents' names, if that applies for those under 18 who help us, contact information. And then we also use this as a media release so that we can share our photos, as you're seeing here. And our overall goal is, we hope to be done one fine day and have all of our trees clean. And then we have a church work day 2 times a year, spring and fall. And we hope to be able to, at some wonderful date, be able to monitor and maintain our good work over these last several years by taking a look at our trees on those spring and fall work days, and just pulling off any new tender vines that show back up. So just lastly, I'll just say that the secrets to our success, I would say, are: 1, enthusiastic leaders that we have been lucky to have. And we have a very supportive pastor and church leadership behind us. That has been really wonderful. We have our catchy name, so I would recommend having some kind of hook or unique fellowship opportunity, like this enjoying wine together in our parking lot after we do our work. If you can come up with some kind of catchy name or hook, it seems more like fun and less like work. Also, one thing that has been really a secret to our success is, as the newness of our program or our project here wore off and people started to realize this is a lot of work, it's a lot of physical work, we reached beyond our walls and got in some new energy into our Wine and Divine program by connecting with an organization called Save Our Trees Together, which is now under the Watershed Stewards Academy. And these folks are dedicated, and they go to sites all over our county. And now they are building our Wine and Divine dates into their schedule. So we get some extra volunteers, and they are so practiced and so good at what they do through Save Our Trees Together. And another thing that we've done, which has been super, super great, we've made a partnership with the Environmental Magnet Program that operates out of Broadneck High School, which is right next door to us. And they have sent over students from Broadneck High to join in our divining efforts. They need credits. They need community service credits. We need their youth and vigor. And that has been really wonderful and re-energized our program. Though when we have the Broadneck students, we don't call it Wine and Divine. We change the name to Sprite and Might. And as a true partnership, we also have helped out at other Save Our Trees Together meetups around the county. And we have mentored Broadneck High School students who have now graduated from the Watershed Stewards Academy program. And in the summer, we take care of their community garden, their teaching garden at their school when they are not in school. We water it, we weed it. I'm saying we are our green team at the church, so that we're giving back to them as they're giving back to us. And it's just a really nice partnership that we've formed, not only with Broadneck High School, but the Broadneck Library that's right next to us. Harbor School, which is a special needs school that's right next to us, we've pulled them into some of our green action at the church. And I really can't stress enough the value of going beyond the church walls and linking up with other organizations and neighbors for a group effort. So I think I'll just stop there and see if there are any questions. I can put my contact information in the chat if anyone wants to reach out to me later on with any specific questions.
Diane, thank you so much. And I am grateful for everyone that is still with us. We're a little bit over, but please don't leave just yet. If we could go to the closing prayer slide. As we close the program out, as long as it's all right with our gracious speakers, maybe to have 2 or 3 more minutes of your time, there are a few questions. Thank you, Diane. You kind of addressed one main one at the bottom from Holy Trinity about what to do when you are done with the vines. But yes, would love to be very respectful of everyone's time. We're going to close with a prayer. And then if we have time, we'll do 1 or 2 questions. Anything that does not get answered here will get answered in the chat, and we'll provide those resources in the post email blast. So thank you again for joining me on a Thursday evening. Spring's right around the corner. What a perfect prayer. From someone I've had the privilege to work with. Some folks that are very familiar with our organization may remember Kolya. And this is a beautiful prayer that she wrote. Source of life, creator of the universe, Holy Spirit, guide our words and actions that we may be instruments of justice and healing for the sacred earth and its waters. May we learn actions we can take to restore health and well-being for all communities. Grant that we may rise to this occasion of heightened possibility to be bearers of hope and solidarity with the diversity of humanity and the whole web of life. Amen, and may it be so.